The intercom crackled to life just as Marcus Rivera signed the final page of the quarterly report. His assistant's voice came through, hesitant, almost apologetic. "Mr. Rivera, there's a situation at the front desk." Marcus didn't look up from his mahogany desk. The floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office framed the city like a conquest, 43 stories of steel and glass, stretching toward a sky that seemed to exist just for him. At 38 years old, Marcus had built Rivera Technologies from a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire. He was used to situations. "Handle it, Grace," he said flatly. A pause, then quieter. "Sir, there's a homeless man claiming to be your father." Marcus's pen stopped mid-signature. The silence that followed was so complete, he could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the distant murmur of the trading floor below. Slowly, he set down the pen, his jaw tightening. "Tell security to escort him out. Mr. Rivera, he's very insistent. He knows things about you, personal details." Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, exhaling through his nose. Scammers were getting creative these days. Last month, someone had claimed to be his long-lost cousin. The month before, a woman insisted she was carrying his child, despite never having met him. The price of success was a parade of con artists and opportunists. "Grace, I don't have a father," he said, voice cold and final. "My father died 28 years ago. Whoever is downstairs is lying. Remove him." "Yes, sir." The intercom clicked off. Marcus returned to his paperwork, but the words swam before his eyes. He blinked hard, forcing the memory back into its locked box where it belonged. His father, dead at 42 from a heart attack when Marcus was just 10 years old, or at least that's what his mother had told him, what the entire family had told him, what he had believed for nearly 3 decades. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The intercom crackled again. "Mr. Rivera, I'm sorry, but he won't leave. Security says he's not being aggressive, just refuses to go. He says he'll wait all day if he has to. He's sitting on the floor in the lobby." Marcus stood abruptly, his chair rolling backward. Heat flushed through his chest, anger mixed with something else, something he refused to name. "I'll handle it myself." He didn't wait for Grace's response. He strode past her desk without a glance, his Italian leather shoes clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. Employees scattered from his path like birds before a storm. Marcus Rivera did not leave his office for trivial matters. When he moved, something important was happening. The elevator ride down felt interminable. 43 floors. 43 floors to confront a lie. The lobby of Rivera Technologies was a temple of modern architecture, all glass and chrome and impossible angles. A massive digital screen displayed stock prices in real time. The company logo, a stylized phoenix rising from circuit board flames, dominated the back wall. Everything about this space screamed power, permanence, legitimacy. And sitting on the floor beside a marble planter, looking utterly out of place, was a man. Marcus stopped 10 feet away. The man was thin, painfully so, his clothes layered and worn, a heavy coat despite the summer heat outside, weathered boots with duct tape holding the sole to the upper. His hair was long and gray, tangled, and a thick beard obscured most of his face. His hands, resting on his knees, were lined with dirt, the nails cracked and uneven. But it was the man's eyes that stopped Marcus cold. They were blue. Not just blue, but a specific shade, like cornflowers in late summer, bright against tanned skin, eyes that held a peculiar intensity, a sharpness that decades of hardship hadn't dulled. Marcus knew those eyes. He saw them every morning in the mirror. "Get up," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. The man slowly rose to his feet. He was taller than Marcus remembered, or maybe Marcus had just been so small back then. The man stood there, swaying slightly, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Security guards hovered nearby, hands near their belts, waiting for Marcus's signal. "You have 60 seconds to tell me what you want," Marcus said. "Then you're done." The man's throat worked. When he spoke, his voice was rough, like gravel being dragged across concrete. Marcus. Just his name. Nothing else. But the way he said it, with a weight that suggested 1,000 unspoken conversations, made something twist inside Marcus's chest. 50 seconds, Marcus said. I know you don't remember me, the man continued, words coming faster now. Or maybe you do. Maybe you remember a man who used to build you towers from blocks, who taught you to ride a bike in the park on 7th Street, who called you his little architect because you always lined up your toys in perfect rows. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. Anyone could know those things. My mother could have told you. Your mother thinks I'm dead. You are dead, Marcus snapped. My father died 28 years ago. No, the man said softly. He just disappeared. The lobby was silent now. A dozen employees had frozen in place, pretending not to watch while hanging on every word. Marcus felt their eyes on him, felt the weight of his reputation, his carefully constructed empire teetering on the edge of this moment. You're a con artist, Marcus said. A good one, I'll give you that. You did your research, but you picked the wrong mark. The man reached into his coat pocket. Security tensed, but he moved slowly, deliberately, pulling out a small object wrapped in a dirty cloth. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing something that gleamed dully in the lobby lights. A pocket watch, gold, tarnished with age, with an inscription on the back. Marcus didn't need to see the words to know what they said. His mother had described that watch to him 100 times. A wedding gift from her father to his father. Lost, she'd said, in the aftermath of the funeral, one more piece of him that had vanished. This was your grandfather's, the man said, engraved with the words, to Robert, may you always find your way home. Your father, my name, was Robert Andrew Rivera. He was born on March 14, 1963, in a small hospital in Brooklyn. He had a scar on his left shin from falling off a fence when he was 12. He was allergic to strawberries. He loved jazz music, Miles Davis especially, and he called your mother Claire Bear because she hated her full name, Clarice. Marcus felt the floor tilt beneath him. No one knew that nickname. No one. His mother had mentioned it only once, years ago, late at night, after too much wine, a private endearment she'd buried with her husband. Where did you get that watch? Marcus demanded. It was mine, the man said simply. I've carried it for 28 years, through every city, every shelter, every night under bridges and in doorways. I kept it because it was the only thing that reminded me I used to be someone else. If you're really my father, Marcus said, his voice shaking now with barely controlled rage, then where the hell have you been? Robert, if that was really his name, lowered his eyes. That's not a story for a lobby, son. Don't call me that, Marcus hissed. Mr. Rivera, Grace's voice came from behind him, uncertain. Should I call the police? Marcus didn't answer. He stared at this stranger, this ghost, this impossible man who had the audacity to walk into his life carrying a watch and a handful of memories. Every instinct screamed at him to have the man thrown out, to return to his office, to forget this ever happened. But those eyes, those damn blue eyes that mirrored his own. Come with me, Marcus said abruptly. Robert blinked. What? You want to tell me a story? Fine, but not here, not in front of everyone. He turned to security. Conference room 3. No interruptions, and someone bring water and food. He didn't wait for acknowledgement. He walked toward the elevators, knowing somehow that the man would follow, and he did, shuffling behind Marcus like a shadow, leaving a faint smell of street and survival in his wake. The conference room was smaller than the boardroom, designed for intimate meetings with clients who preferred privacy. Marcus shut the door firmly and gestured to a chair. Sit. Robert sat slowly, his eyes scanning the room as if he couldn't quite believe he was here. A security guard entered with bottled water and a sandwich from the executive kitchen. Robert's hands trembled as he reached for the water, drinking half the bottle in desperate gulps. Marcus stood by the window, arms crossed, back turned. He couldn't look at the man yet, not directly. Talk, he said. Robert set down the water bottle. It started with debt. Debt, Marcus repeated flatly. Business debt. I had a small construction company you wouldn't remember. We built custom homes, did renovations. It was good work, honest work. But I made bad decisions, took loans from the wrong people to cover a project that went south. When I couldn't pay them back, they came for everything. So you ran, Marcus said. So I ran, Robert echoed. But not at first. At first I tried to fix it. I borrowed more from worse people. I thought I could dig myself out. Your mother didn't know how bad it was. I kept it from her, kept smiling, kept pretending everything was fine. Marcus turned slightly. And then? And then they threatened you. The words hung in the air like smoke. They came to the house one night when you were asleep. Told me they knew where you went to school, what time your mother picked you up, what park you played in. They said if I didn't pay, they'd take what I loved most. Marcus's breath caught. I had 72 hours, Robert continued. I could either disappear and they'd leave you alone, or I could stay and watch them destroy my family. So I left. I staged a scene, made it look like I'd gone to the store and never came back. I left everything, my wallet, my car, my wedding ring. I became no one. You let us think you were dead, Marcus said, his voice hollow. Your mother did that on her own, Robert said. Maybe she needed to believe I was dead rather than gone. Maybe it was easier. I don't know. I only know I've spent 28 years living in alleys and shelters, working day labor when I could, stealing when I had to, always moving, always alone. Because if I came back, if they found out I'd returned, the threat would return too. Why now? Marcus demanded. Why come back now? Robert's face crumpled. Because I'm dying. The room went silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Cancer, Robert said simply. Liver, lungs, probably everywhere by now. Doctor at the free clinic says I have maybe 6 months, and I thought, what's the point of surviving if I die without ever telling my son the truth? Marcus finally turned to face him fully. The man who claimed to be his father looked small in the leather chair, diminished by time and hardship. But those eyes, those impossible eyes, held steady. You expect me to believe this? Marcus said. That you sacrificed everything to protect us? That you've been out there suffering alone while we moved on? I don't expect anything, Robert said. I'm just telling you what happened. And the men who threatened you? Where are they now? Gone, dead, arrested? I don't know. The man who ran that operation died in prison 15 years ago. I heard about it from another guy on the streets, but by then I'd been gone so long I didn't know how to come back, didn't know if you'd want me to, didn't know if I deserved to. Marcus walked to the table and sat down across from Robert. Up close, he could see the lines etched deep into the man's face, the yellowed tinge to his eyes, the way his hands shook even as he tried to hold them still. Prove it, Marcus said. What? Prove you're my father. The watch could have been stolen. The stories could have been researched. Prove it. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat again, pulling out something else. A photograph, creased and faded, protected by a plastic sleeve that had been taped and retaped so many times it was more tape than plastic. He slid it across the table. Marcus picked it up. It was them. Him at maybe 7 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on the shoulders of a younger, healthier version of the man across from him. They were at the beach. Marcus remembered that day suddenly, with a clarity that made his chest ache. His father had taught him to body surf. They'd eaten sandy sandwiches, and his mother had laughed so hard she'd snorted lemonade. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, were words. My boy. My everything. Marcus's hand began to shake. I carried that every day, Robert said quietly. Even when I forgot my own name, even when I couldn't remember what year it was, I carried that. Because you were the reason I survived, not for me. For the chance that maybe, somehow, someday I could see you one more time. Marcus set the photo down carefully. His throat was tight, his eyes burning. Everything he'd built, every success, every achievement had been constructed on the foundation of his father's absence. The story he'd told himself, the man he'd become, was rooted in the belief that his father had died, had been taken from him by fate. But if this man was telling the truth, if his father had chosen to leave, to sacrifice himself, then everything Marcus thought he knew was a lie. And yet, looking into those cornflower blue eyes, Marcus saw something he couldn't deny. He saw himself. "I need time," Marcus said finally. Robert nodded. "I understand." "No," Marcus said, standing abruptly. "You don't. You can't just walk back into my life after 28 years with a sob story and a photograph and expect everything to be okay. You destroyed us. You destroyed my mother. Do you have any idea what she went through, what I went through?" His voice was rising now, years of buried anger surfacing. "I waited for you every single day for 2 years. Every car that drove past, every man who walked down the street, I thought it might be you. I drew pictures of you in school. I talked to you at night before bed, and you were out there, alive, and you never came back." "I know," Robert whispered. "You don't know." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "You don't know what it's like to be 10 years old and have everyone pity you, to watch your mother cry herself to sleep, to grow up without a father when you needed one most. I built this company from nothing because I had something to prove, because I wanted to be someone my father would be proud of. But he was dead. At least, I thought he was. That made sense. Death makes sense. But this?" He gestured wildly at Robert. "This is just abandonment dressed up as sacrifice." Robert's face was wet with tears now, silent streams cutting through the grime on his cheeks. "You're right," he said. "You're absolutely right. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve anything from you. But I'm here because I needed you to know the truth before I die. That every day away from you and your mother was hell. That I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I loved you more than my own life." Marcus turned away, staring out the window at the city that had made him, that had forged him in the crucible of abandonment and ambition. "I need a DNA test," he said finally. "Of course. And I need you to tell my mother yourself. If you're lying, if this is some scheme, I'll destroy you. But if you're telling the truth, then she deserves to know. She deserves to hear it from you." "I don't know if she'll want to see me," Robert said. "She won't," Marcus replied. "But you owe her that much." He called Grace on the intercom. "Set up a medical appointment for our guest. Full workup. And arrange for a DNA test. Send the results to my private email." "Yes, sir." Marcus looked at Robert one more time. "There's a hotel 2 blocks from here, the Meridian. I'll have Grace book you a room for a week. Clean up, eat, rest. In 3 days, we'll have the test results. If they confirm what you're saying, we'll talk about next steps." Robert stood slowly, unsteadily. "Marcus, Don't," Marcus cut him off. "Don't thank me. Don't apologize. Just do what I asked." Robert nodded and shuffled toward the door. As he reached it, he paused, his hand on the handle. "You look just like your mother," he said softly. "Strong, determined, unbreakable. I'm glad. It means I didn't ruin you completely." Then he was gone. Marcus stood alone in the conference room, staring at the photograph still lying on the table. A father and son at the beach, frozen in a moment of pure joy, unaware that everything was about to fall apart. He picked up the photo with trembling hands and pressed it against his chest. And for the first time in 28 years, Marcus Rivera, CEO and self-made billionaire, allowed himself to cry. 3 days felt like 3 years. Marcus threw himself into work with a ferocity that alarmed even his most dedicated employees. He stayed at the office until midnight, reviewing contracts that didn't need reviewing, attending meetings that could have been emails, anything to keep his mind occupied. But at night, alone in his penthouse apartment, the questions came. What if the DNA test was positive? What if this man really was his father? What then? Did 28 years of absence get erased by a tragic story? Did suffering justify abandonment? And more terrifying still, what if Marcus forgave him? What if he let this broken stranger back into his life, only to lose him again in 6 months to cancer? The email arrived on a Tuesday morning at 6:42 a.m. Marcus was already awake, had been for hours, staring at his phone like it was a bomb counting down. When the notification lit up his screen, his heart stopped. Subject: DNA analysis results, confidential. His finger hovered over the screen, everything balanced on this moment. His entire understanding of his life, his identity, his past. He opened it. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. The phone slipped from his hands onto the marble countertop with a clatter. It was true. All of it was true. The homeless man in the lobby was Robert Andrew Rivera, his father, alive, real, not a ghost, not a memory, but flesh and blood and 28 years of suffering. Marcus sat down heavily on a bar stool, his legs suddenly unable to hold him. He read the report 3 more times, looking for errors, for disclaimers, for any escape from this new reality. But the science was clear, unambiguous, certain. He had a father, and his father was dying. Marcus didn't remember driving to the Meridian Hotel. He found himself in the lobby, then in the elevator, then standing outside room 412, his hand raised to knock. He stood there for a full minute before his knuckles finally made contact with the door. Shuffling sounds from inside. The door opened slowly. Robert stood there, and Marcus barely recognized him. He was clean. His hair had been cut short, his beard trimmed neatly. He wore simple clothes, jeans, and a button-down shirt probably purchased from a nearby department store. Without the layers of grime and desperation, Marcus could see him clearly for the first time. The resemblance was undeniable. The same strong jaw, the same high cheekbones, the same way their eyebrows drew together when they were thinking. "You got the results," Robert said quietly. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice yet. "Come in." The hotel room was modest but clean. The bed was made with military precision. A small stack of books sat on the nightstand. Library books, Marcus noted. About reconnecting with family, about terminal illness, about forgiveness. A framed photo, the beach photo, sat beside the lamp. "I've been preparing," Robert said, following Marcus's gaze, "trying to figure out what to say to you." How to explain 28 years in a way that makes sense? "It doesn't make sense," Marcus said, his voice rough. "None of this makes sense. But it's true. The DNA doesn't lie." Robert sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. "No, it doesn't." Marcus remained standing, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. "I told my mother you were alive." Robert's head snapped up, eyes wide. "What did she say?" "Nothing at first. She just stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Then she laughed. Then she cried. Then she threw a coffee mug at the wall." Marcus's jaw tightened. "She doesn't believe me. She thinks you're a con artist, that the DNA test is fake, that I'm being manipulated. She refused to see you." Robert closed his eyes, nodding slowly. "I expected that." "Did you?" Marcus's voice rose. "Did you really?" "Because I didn't. I thought maybe she'd want answers. Maybe she'd want closure. But instead I've reopened a wound that took her 3 decades to heal, and she hates me for it." "She doesn't hate you," Robert said. "You don't know her anymore," Marcus shot back. "You don't get to tell me what she feels. You gave up that right when you disappeared." Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Marcus walked to the window, looking out at the city below, people moving through their lives, unaware that his was shattering and reforming with every passing second. "The cancer," Marcus said finally. "How bad is it?" "Bad," Robert admitted. "Stage 4. It started in the liver, spread to the lungs and bones. They offered treatment, but even with it, I'd have maybe a year. Without it, 6 months, maybe less." And you can't afford treatment." "No." Marcus turned around. "I can." Robert shook his head quickly. "That's not why I came here. I didn't come for money, Marcus. I came to tell you the truth before I died. That's all." "I know," Marcus said, "but I'm not offering because you asked. I'm offering because despite everything, despite the anger and the confusion and the absolute mess you've made of my life by coming back, you're still my father, and I'm not ready to lose you again, not when I just found you." Robert's composure cracked. His shoulders shook as he bent forward, hands covering his face. The sound that came from him was raw, animal, decades of pain pouring out at once. Marcus stood frozen, unsure what to do. He hadn't hugged anyone in years, hadn't allowed himself that kind of vulnerability. But something deep inside him, something that remembered being 10 years old and climbing into his father's lap, moved him forward. He sat down beside Robert and placed a hand on his back. Robert grabbed him then, pulled him into an embrace that felt like drowning and breathing at the same time. Marcus stiffened, then slowly, hesitantly, wrapped his arms around his father and held on. "I'm sorry," Robert sobbed. "I'm so sorry." "I'm so sorry." "I know," Marcus whispered. "I know." They stayed like that for a long time, two men separated by nearly 3 decades, connected by blood and loss and the fragile possibility of healing. The weeks that followed were strange and difficult and unexpectedly tender. Marcus arranged for Robert to see the best oncologists in the city. The news wasn't good. The cancer was too advanced, but they started aggressive treatment anyway. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental drugs. Robert endured it all with quiet stoicism, never complaining, even when Marcus could see the pain etched in every line of his face. They began meeting regularly. Coffee in the mornings before Marcus went to the office. Lunch when Robert felt strong enough. Quiet evenings in the hospital room when the treatment left him too weak to leave. At first, their conversations were stilted, awkward. They were strangers, learning each other's languages. But slowly, carefully, they began to build something new. Robert told Marcus about life on the streets, the shelters he'd stayed in, some kind, some nightmarish. The people he'd met, those who'd lost everything, and those who'd never had anything to begin with. He spoke of the cold that seeped into your bones in winter, the hunger that became a constant companion, the way you learned to sleep with one eye open and your possessions clutched close. "There was a man named Joseph," Robert said one afternoon as they sat in the hospital garden. "He'd been a lawyer before he lost his family in an accident. He taught me how to survive, how to find the safe places, the good meal programs which cops would leave you alone, and which would make your life hell. He saved my life more than once." "What happened to him?" Marcus asked. "He died 3 winters ago. Pneumonia. I held his hand at the free clinic until he was gone. He had no one else." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You became a different person out there." "I had to," Robert said. "The man I was, your father, he couldn't survive on the streets. So I became someone else. Someone harder. Someone who could endure." "Do you regret it?" Marcus asked. "The choice you made?" Robert looked at him for a long time. "Every single day, but I'd make it again if it meant keeping you safe." Marcus didn't know how to respond to that. One evening Marcus brought something to the hospital room, a box, worn and taped, that he'd kept in the back of his closet for years. "I want to show you something," he said. He opened the box carefully. Inside were remnants of his childhood, report cards, drawings, school projects, and at the bottom a stack of letters, dozens of them, written in a child's handwriting. "I wrote to you," Marcus said quietly, "after you disappeared. My therapist said it would help with the grief, so I wrote letters. Told you about school, about Mom, about my life, things I wished I could tell you." Robert's hands trembled as he took the letters. He opened one, then another, reading words written by a 10-year-old boy to a father he thought was dead. "Dear Dad, I got an A on my science project. I built a bridge out of popsicle sticks. It held 20 pounds. Mr. Chen said it was the best in the class. I wish you could have seen it. Mom says you would be proud. I miss you. Love, Marcus. Dear Dad, today was hard. Some kids at school said mean things about me not having a father. I didn't cry until I got home. I punched my pillow and pretended it was them. I'm sorry for being angry. I know you didn't want to leave. Love, Marcus. Dear Dad, I'm 14 now. I don't write as much anymore. Mom says I need to move on, but I don't know how to move on from someone I still miss every day. Sometimes I dream about you. In my dreams, you come back and everything is okay again. Then I wake up and you're still gone. Love, Marcus. Robert read letter after letter, tears streaming down his face, his body shaking with silent sobs. When he finished the last one, he carefully placed them back in the box and looked at Marcus with eyes full of grief. I would have been proud, he said, his voice breaking, of every single thing, the bridges, the grades, the man you became. I am proud, Marcus, even though I had no right to be. Marcus felt his own eyes burning. You had every right. You're my father? I abandoned you? Robert said. You saved me, Marcus replied. I'm still angry about it. I'm still hurt, but I understand why you did it. And I think, maybe, eventually, I can forgive you. Robert reached out and took Marcus's hand. His grip was weak, the cancer eating away at his strength, but his hold was steady. That's more than I deserve, he whispered. Maybe, Marcus said, but it's what I'm offering anyway. The treatment wasn't working. The doctor said it gently, with compassion, but the truth was stark. The tumors were growing, despite the aggressive interventions. Robert's body was shutting down, piece by piece. They gave him 2 months, maybe 3. Marcus moved Robert into his penthouse. The guest room was converted into a medical space, with a hospital bed, monitors, and nursing staff rotating through around the clock. It was clinical and impersonal, but Robert didn't complain. He seemed grateful just to be somewhere clean and warm and safe. Marcus worked from home now, conducting meetings from his study while keeping an ear out for any changes in Robert's condition. He found himself checking on his father between calls, bringing him water, adjusting his pillows, sitting beside him during the worst of the pain. It was strange playing caregiver to the man who should have been caring for him. But there was something healing in it too, something redemptive. One afternoon, Marcus came home from a brief meeting to find Robert sitting in the living room, out of bed for the first time in days. He was staring at the view, the city spreading out below them like a kingdom. You built this, Robert said as Marcus entered. Not just the company, your whole life. You built something real and lasting. Marcus sat down beside him. I had good motivation. I wanted to be nothing like the father I thought I had. Robert flinched. That's fair. No, Marcus said. That came out wrong. I mean, I thought you'd given up, that you'd walked away because things got hard. So I promised myself I'd never quit, never walk away, no matter what. I'd face every problem head on. He paused. I didn't realize until you came back that you were facing your problems head on. You just faced them alone. Robert's eyes glistened. I should have trusted your mother. Should have told her the truth. Maybe together we could have found another way. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But you can't change the past. None of us can. We can only decide what we do with the time we have left. Robert turned to look at him. What do you want to do with our time, Marcus? Marcus thought for a moment. I want you to tell me everything. Every story you can remember from before you left, every moment you shared with Mom, everything about who you were, who we were as a family. I want to know my father. So Robert talked. He told Marcus about the day he met Clarice, at a jazz club in the city, how she'd been wearing a red dress and laughing with friends, how he'd worked up the courage to ask her to dance, how she'd said yes and changed his life forever. He told him about their wedding, small and intimate, in her parents' backyard. How it had rained and they'd all gotten soaked, but no one cared because the joy was too big to be dampened by weather. He told him about the night Marcus was born, how he'd held this tiny, screaming bundle and felt more terrified and more in love than he'd ever thought possible. How he'd promised this little boy everything, protection, guidance, love, and how he'd broken that promise in the worst way. "But you kept the most important promise," Marcus said. "You kept me safe." The days blurred together, good moments mixed with hard ones, laughter shared over old photographs followed by pain so intense Robert couldn't speak. Marcus learned to administer medications, to recognize the signs of distress, to simply be present in the suffering. And slowly, against all odds, they forgave each other. Marcus forgave his father for leaving. Robert forgave himself for surviving. One evening, as the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Robert spoke quietly from his bed. "Marcus, I need you to do something for me." "Anything," Marcus said, looking up from his laptop. "Go see your mother. Tell her I'm dying. Tell her I understand if she never wants to see me, but that I need her to know I never stopped loving her, not for a single day." Marcus hesitated. "She still refuses to believe you're really you." "Then take her a message only I would know." Robert closed his eyes, remembering. "Tell her about the tulips." "Tulips?" "On our 5th anniversary, I was broke, completely broke. I'd just started the business, and every penny was going into keeping it afloat. I couldn't afford flowers from a shop, so I snuck into a public garden at dawn and picked tulips, yellow ones, her favorite. I got caught by a security guard and had to run, clutching these flowers like a thief." A small smile crossed his face. "When I gave them to her, all rumpled and wilting from my sprint, I told her they were contraband tulips, stolen just for her. She laughed so hard she cried. Then she put them in a vase and said they were the most beautiful flowers anyone had ever given her because they came with a story." Robert opened his eyes. "No one knows that story but her and me. Tell her. She'll know it's really me." Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "I'll tell her." The next day, Marcus drove to his mother's house for the first time in weeks. She'd been avoiding him, hurt and angry that he'd entertained this stranger's claims. When she opened the door, her eyes were wary. "Mom," Marcus said, "please just give me 5 minutes." Claire sighed, but stepped aside to let him in. Her home was exactly as Marcus remembered, filled with photographs and memories, a shrine to a life that had ended 28 years ago. "He's dying," Marcus said without preamble. "The cancer is everywhere. He has weeks, maybe days, and before he goes, he needs you to know something." "Marcus, please, I can't—" "Contraband tulips," Marcus interrupted. Claire froze. Her face went pale. "What did you say?" "Your 5th anniversary. He was broke. He stole yellow tulips from a public garden at dawn, got chased by a security guard, brought them to you all wilted and rumpled, and told you they were contraband tulips, stolen just for you." Claire's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. "No one knew that story. No one. We never told anyone because it was ours, private, special." "He remembered," Marcus said gently. "He remembered everything, Mom. Every moment. Every detail, because he loved you. Because he never stopped loving you." Claire sank into a chair, her whole body trembling. "It's really him. Robert? My Robert?" "Yes?" She wept then, great heaving sobs that shook her entire frame. Marcus knelt beside her, holding her as she cried for the husband she'd lost and found, and was losing all over again. "I need to see him," she whispered finally. "I need to see him before he's gone." Marcus helped her to the car. The drive back to his penthouse was silent, except for Claire's occasional sniffles. She clutched a tissue in one hand and Marcus's hand in the other, holding on like she might fly apart without an anchor. When they entered the penthouse, Robert was awake. He'd insisted on being moved to the wheelchair, on being dressed in real clothes. He sat by the window, painfully thin, but with his eyes clear and alert. Claire stopped in the doorway. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other across 28 years of grief and absence and love that had never quite died. "Bobby," Claire whispered, using the nickname she'd sworn never to speak again. "Claire Bear," Robert replied, his voice cracking. She crossed the room in 3 steps and collapsed beside him, her hands reaching for his face, touching him like she couldn't quite believe he was real. He cupped her face in return, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. For everything." "You came back," she sobbed. "After all this time, you came back. I never wanted to leave. Never. I thought I was protecting you, protecting Marcus. I thought if I disappeared, you'd both be safe." "You idiot," she said, but there was no anger in it, only grief. "We could have figured it out together. We were a team." "I know," he whispered. "I know that now. But I was so scared, Claire, so scared of losing you both, so I lost you anyway, just in a different way." They held each other, 2 people who had loved each other long ago, finding each other again in the shadow of death. Marcus stood back, giving them space, watching something beautiful and heartbreaking unfold. Claire stayed all night. She sat beside Robert's bed holding his hand, telling him about the 28 years he'd missed. She told him about Marcus's graduations, his first business success, the empire he'd built. She told him about her own life, the grief counseling, the support groups, the slow, painful process of learning to live again. And Robert listened, drinking in every word, every detail, storing them away like treasures. As dawn broke over the city, Robert's breathing became labored. The monitors began to beep more insistently. The nurse checked his vitals and looked at Marcus with sad, knowing eyes. "It won't be long now," she said softly. Marcus called Claire into the room. They stood on either side of Robert's bed, each holding one of his hands. Robert's eyes opened, unfocused at first, then clearing as he saw them. "My family," he whispered. "Together. We're here," Marcus said, his voice thick. "We're right here." "I'm sorry I missed so much," Robert said, struggling to get the words out. "Sorry I wasn't there to see you grow up. To see the man you became." "You're here now," Marcus said. "That's what matters." Robert's gaze shifted to Claire. "I love you." Never stopped. Not ever. "I love you too," she whispered. "I always did. Even when I thought you were gone, especially then." Robert smiled, a peaceful expression settling over his features. "Take care of each other. Don't make my mistakes. Don't run from the hard things. Face them together." "We will," Marcus promised. Robert's breathing slowed. The monitor's beeping grew irregular. His eyes closed, then opened one last time. "Marcus," he whispered, "thank you for letting me be your father again, even just for a little while." "You were always my father," Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. "Always." Robert smiled once more, then his eyes closed, his breathing stopped, and he was gone. The room filled with silence, broken only by Claire's quiet weeping, and the steady sound of Marcus's heart breaking and healing all at once. Robert Andrew Rivera was buried on a Tuesday morning in the same cemetery where his funeral service had been held 28 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. This time, there was a body. This time, there was closure. The service was small. Claire, Marcus, a handful of people from the shelters where Robert had stayed, and oddly, several high-powered executives from Rivera Technologies who came because Marcus asked them to. Marcus stood before the assembled group, a piece of paper trembling in his hands. "I thought I knew what loss was," he began. "I thought losing my father at 10 years old was the hardest thing I'd ever face. I built my entire life around that loss, around proving I could succeed despite it." He paused, looking at the casket. But then he came back. "And I learned that loss isn't always permanent, that sometimes, impossibly, miraculously, we get second chances. Not the chances we want, not the clean, easy ones, but messy, complicated, painful chances that require us to forgive the unforgivable and love the broken parts of people we thought we'd buried. My father made a terrible choice 28 years ago. He left to protect us, and in doing so, he wounded us in ways that never fully healed. But he also spent 28 years suffering for that choice. 28 years alone, in pain, carrying the weight of his decision every single day. Marcus's voice cracked. He came back not for money, not for comfort, but to tell the truth, to give us the gift of knowing he loved us enough to sacrifice everything, even his own identity, his own life, to keep us safe. I don't know if that makes his choice right. I don't know if suffering balances the scales, but I do know that in the weeks I had with him, I saw a man of incredible courage, a man who faced death with dignity, who owned his mistakes, who loved with his whole heart, even when that heart was failing. He taught me something important. That strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up, even when you're broken, even when getting up means facing the people you hurt and asking for forgiveness you might not deserve. Marcus folded the paper and placed it on the casket. Goodbye, Dad. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for the truth. Thank you for showing me that love doesn't end just because people do. Rest now. You've earned it. They lowered the casket into the ground beside the empty grave that had been dug for him so many years before. Claire threw in a handful of yellow tulips. Marcus added the beach photograph, the one Robert had carried for 28 years, finally returning it to its rightful place. As the mourners dispersed, Marcus and Claire stood together, two people bound by loss and love and the strange grace of second chances. What do we do now? Claire asked. Marcus put his arm around her shoulders. We live. We remember. We forgive. And we make sure his sacrifice wasn't for nothing. 6 months later, Marcus stood before the board of directors of Rivera Technologies with an unusual proposal. I want to start a foundation, he said, the Robert Rivera Foundation, for homeless advocacy and support. He clicked to the next slide. Every year, thousands of people end up on the streets, not because they're lazy or addicted, but because circumstances beyond their control push them there. Medical debt, job loss, domestic violence, mental illness. My father was one of them, a good man who made a hard choice and ended up losing everything. This foundation will provide job training, housing assistance, medical care, and legal support for homeless individuals trying to rebuild their lives. We'll partner with shelters, create transitional housing, and work to remove the barriers that keep people trapped in cycles of poverty. One board member raised a hand. This is a significant financial commitment. How does it benefit the company? Marcus looked at the man steadily. It doesn't. Not directly, but it benefits the world my company exists in, and it honors a man who taught me that success means nothing if we don't use it to lift others up. The board approved the foundation unanimously. Within a year, the Robert Rivera Foundation had helped 300 people find stable housing and employment. Within 2 years, that number was over 1,000. The programs expanded to multiple cities, funded by Marcus's personal fortune and donations from others inspired by Robert's story. Marcus visited the shelters regularly. He listened to stories from people who'd lost everything, who reminded him of his father. And sometimes, when he met someone with cornflower blue eyes and a sad smile, he'd sit a little longer, listen a little closer, and offer a hand up. Claire became involved too. She volunteered at the foundation's office, coordinating services, advocating for policy changes. She said it made her feel closer to Robert, carrying on the work he'd started by simply surviving. One evening, Marcus returned to his penthouse and found himself in the guest room where Robert had spent his final days. It had been converted back to its original state, but Marcus could still feel his father's presence there. He pulled out the box of childhood letters and added something new, a letter he'd written after Robert's death. Dear Dad, You've been gone 6 months now. The grief comes in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes drowning, but underneath it is something I didn't expect: gratitude. I'm grateful you came back, grateful you told the truth, grateful for every conversation, every story, every moment we had together at the end. You taught me that it's never too late to try to make things right, never too late to love, to forgive, to heal. Because of you, I'm softer now, more patient, more willing to see the complexity in people's choices. The foundation is thriving. We're helping people, Dad. People like you, who just need someone to believe in them again. People who made hard choices and paid terrible prices. I think you'd be proud. I hope you're at peace now. I hope wherever you are, you know that you were loved, that despite everything, despite the years and the pain and the absence, you were always my father, and I was always your son. Love, Marcus. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in the box with all the others. Then he carried the box to his study and placed it on a shelf beside his most important documents: the incorporation papers for Rivera Technologies, the patents for their breakthrough products, and now the founding documents for the Robert Rivera Foundation. A legacy of absence transformed into a legacy of presence, a story of loss rewritten as a story of love. Marcus walked to the window and looked out at the city, at the lights spreading out like stars, at the people below living their complicated, messy, beautiful lives. He thought about his father, about the choice he'd made, about the years he'd suffered. And for the first time since Robert had walked into that lobby, claiming to be his father, Marcus felt peace. Not because the story had a happy ending, it didn't. Death never allowed for happy endings, but because it had a true one. And sometimes Marcus had learned truth was better than happiness. Truth could be built on. Truth could heal. Truth could set you free. He placed his hand against the glass, his reflection staring back at him with cornflower blue eyes. "Thank you," he whispered to the ghost of his father, to the memory, to the second chance they'd been given. "Thank you for coming home." And somewhere in the space between memory and hope, Marcus felt his father's presence, felt the answer that needed no words. "You're welcome, son. You're welcome. Thank you for sharing this moment of chance, connection, and meaning. If this story reminded you that it's never too late for truth, for forgiveness, for love, then please subscribe to Lucky Encounters. We bring you heartfelt tales of serendipity, where a simple twist of fate can change everything. Until next time, stay open, stay hopeful, and remember, sometimes the greatest gift is the chance to say goodbye properly. Subscribe now.